Benjamin Hayes sipped his morning coffee as he looked out the large window of his office. The view showed the glittering spires of Nexus Station against the backdrop of stars. As the human ambassador to the Galactic Concord, Hayes had grown used to the sight, but it still took his breath away sometimes. His office in the human embassy was simple but comfortable. Pictures of Earth and his hometown of Portland lined one wall. On his desk sat a small plant from his garden back home. The quiet morning was broken when a soft blue light pulsed on his desk. "Ambassador Hayes, there is an emergency broadcast from the Archelian Empire," said Diana, his AI assistant. Her voice was calm but urgent. Hayes put down his coffee cup. "Show me." A large screen appeared on the wall opposite his desk. The sleek emblem of the Archelian Empire filled the screen before fading to reveal a stark image. Rows of Vesperi people knelt on the ground. Hayes recognized them by their violet skin and delicate features. Their four-fingered hands were bound behind their backs. Armed Archelian soldiers stood behind them, weapons ready. Hayes leaned forward, his heart beginning to race. The Vesperi were a peaceful people who had recently sought alliance with humans after fleeing Archelian expansion in their home systems. The camera panned across the scene, showing not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of Vesperi prisoners in a massive field. The scene switched to other locations, all with similar images of captured Vesperi. A voice began to speak over the footage. The translator in Hayes' office rendered the harsh Archelian language into English. "Today, the glorious Archelian Empire has cleansed itself of 50,000 traitors and sympathizers to the human cause." Hayes stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "Diana, verify this broadcast." "The broadcast is genuine, Ambassador. It is being transmitted across all major Galactic Concord channels." The broadcast continued as Emperor Zakroth IV appeared on screen. The Emperor's scaled face showed no emotion as he spoke. "Let this serve as a warning to all who align with humans. The Archelian Empire will not tolerate such betrayal. These Vesperi chose to abandon their rightful place in our empire to seek protection from humans." The scene changed again. This time, Hayes had to steady himself against his desk. The footage showed mass executions. Beams of energy cut down rows of kneeling Vesperi. Their bodies fell forward into large trenches. Hayes felt sick. He wanted to look away, but knew he needed to witness this. The scope of the atrocity was beyond anything in recent galactic history. "This necessary cleansing will ensure the purity and strength of our expanding empire," the Emperor continued. "We have removed these weak elements from our society." Then the Emperor looked directly at the camera, his yellow eyes seeming to stare straight at Hayes. "To the human diplomatic corps, particularly Ambassador Hayes, what will you do now? Your new allies are gone. Will you hide behind your words, or will you show the galaxy that humans are more than just talk? We are waiting for your response." The broadcast ended, leaving Hayes staring at a blank screen. For several moments, he couldn't move. The coffee on his desk had gone cold. Outside his window, he could see people running through the embassy corridors. His communication system was lighting up with incoming calls. "Diana, call an emergency meeting of the diplomatic team. Right now." "Yes, Ambassador." "Also, Earth Central Government is requesting immediate communication." Hayes straightened his jacket. His mind was already racing through options, consequences, and responses. 50,000 innocent lives, extinguished to send a message. To provoke Earth, to provoke him personally. "Tell them I'll respond after I meet with my team." And Diana, download all available information about recent Archelian military movements and any intelligence on the Vesperi refugees. As Hayes left his office, he knew that this moment would define not just his career, but humanity's place in the galaxy. The Archelian Empire had just thrown down a challenge that could not be ignored. The conference room buzzed with urgent voices as Hayes entered. 6 faces turned to him, each showing different stages of shock and anger. Hayes took his seat at the head of the oval table. "Everyone has seen the broadcast?" he asked. Nods answered him. Olivia Martinez, His chief strategist slammed her fist on the table. "This is an act of war," she said. Her dark eyes flashed with fury. 50,000 civilians executed to send us a message. The Earth fleet needs to respond immediately. Richard Campbell, senior advisor on interspecies law, shook his head. His silver hair caught the light as he moved. Military action is exactly what the Archelians want. They're trying to provoke us into a direct conflict. So we do nothing. Martinez shot back. Let them kill our allies without consequences. Hayes raised his hand for silence. The room quieted. "What options do we have?" he asked. Samuel Wright, a veteran diplomat who had been Hayes' friend for 20 years, leaned forward. His weathered face was grim. "The Archelian Empire has planet-killer weapons, Ben. We've known this for years. If we attack them directly, they might use those weapons against Earth colonies, maybe even Earth itself." Hayes nodded. The stakes couldn't be higher. His communication device beeped. "Ambassador, I have the Earth Security Council waiting," Diana announced. With a gesture, Hayes activated the large screen on the wall. 5 serious faces appeared. "Ambassador Hayes," began the council chair, "we've all seen the broadcast. You understand this requires extreme caution. 50,000 people were just murdered," Hayes replied. "And we can't risk billions more by rushing into war," said another council member. "The Archelian Empire has made technological advances we don't fully understand." "What are your orders?" Hayes asked, keeping his voice steady. "Diplomatic measures only. Condemn the action. Propose sanctions through the Galactic Concord. But under no circumstances are you to threaten military action." Hayes felt his jaw tighten. "With respect, that response will be seen as weakness throughout the galaxy. Your job is to prevent this situation from escalating, Ambassador. Is that clear?" After the call ended, Hayes turned back to his team. "You heard them. The public won't accept this," said Martinez, pushing a tablet across the table. "Look at the feeds from Earth and the colonies." Hayes glanced at the screen. Protests were already forming outside government buildings. People held signs with images of Vesperi, "Justice for 50,000, appeared again and again. "There's more," said Lisa Chen, his intelligence officer. "We're getting reports of human traders being detained throughout Archelian space. 3 ships have been seized, and the Archelians are rounding up more Vesperi communities near their borders." Hayes stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass lay the vast central hub of Nexus Station, where representatives from 100 species conducted the business of the Galactic Concord. He could see unusual movement as news of the broadcast spread. "They're watching us," Wright said, coming to stand beside him. "Every species in the Concord. They want to see how humans respond when our allies are slaughtered." Hayes turned back to his team. "Richard, prepare a formal condemnation for the Concord Assembly. Olivia, draft economic sanctions that will hurt the Empire without harming civilian populations. Lisa, get me everything we have on the Archelian court and power structure." "What are you planning?" Wright asked, studying his friend's face. "I'm going to Archelaus Prime," Hayes said. "I'm going to face Emperor Zakroth directly." The room erupted in protests. "That's suicide," Martinez said. "They just executed 50,000 people to provoke us. They'll kill you the moment you land." "The Security Council will never approve this," Campbell added. Hayes looked at each of them in turn. "Sometimes the only way to face a bully is to walk straight up to them. Besides, if I go personally, it buys us time. And time is what we need right now." Wright sighed. "I'll start preparing the diplomatic protocols for a visit to the Imperial Court." Hayes nodded, his mind already planning the most dangerous diplomatic mission of his career. The Earth Security Council was not happy with Hayes' decision. The emergency meeting lasted for hours. Hayes stood firm as faces on the screen argued against his plan to travel to Archelaus Prime. "This is reckless, Ambassador," said the defense minister. "You are too valuable to risk." "With respect," Hayes replied, This is exactly why I must go. The Archelians called me out by name. If I send someone else, it shows fear. In the end, they couldn't stop him. As Earth's top diplomat to the Galactic Concord, Hayes had certain freedoms. The Council could advise, but not command. 3 days later, Hayes stood in the dock bay looking at the diplomatic vessel that would take him into the heart of the Archelian Empire. The ship was called Olive Branch, a small but elegant craft designed for diplomatic missions. Its silver hull gleamed under the bay lights. "Are you sure about this?" Samuel Wright asked, standing beside him. "No," Hayes admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." His team for the mission was small. Laura Wilson, a woman with short blonde hair and quick eyes, was one of the best xenolinguists in the diplomatic corps. She spoke 7 alien languages, including all 3 Archelian dialects. Daniel Clark, a tall man with dark skin and watchful eyes, had once been Special Forces before joining diplomatic security. His calm presence made Hayes feel safer about the journey. Catherine Palmer completed the team. She was an expert in Archelian culture who had spent 5 years living on an Archelian colony world. Her round glasses and quiet manner hid a sharp mind that understood the complex layers of imperial society. "The ship is ready, Ambassador," Clark said. "We should leave now to make our jump window." As they boarded the ship, Hayes received one last update from Lisa Chen. "We have reports of more Vesperi communities being rounded up in the border systems," she said, her face grim on the screen. "The numbers are in the thousands." Hayes felt the weight of those lives on his shoulders. "Keep me updated on everything. We'll be at reduced communication once we enter Archelian space." The journey would take 4 days. The first 2 days passed in preparation. Hayes spent hours reading reports on the current Archelian power structure. He studied videos of Emperor Zakroth, looking for any clue to the ruler's thinking. In the ship's small conference room, Catherine Palmer briefed the team on Archelian customs. "The Empire values strength above all," she explained. "Showing any weakness will lose their respect instantly. But they also have strict rules of protocol," she continued. "Breaking these rules gives them excuse to dismiss you or worse." Laura Wilson worked with Hayes on his pronunciation of formal Archelian greetings. The language was difficult, with clicks and tones that human throats struggled to make. When not preparing, Hayes read history. He studied records of human diplomacy during crises. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the Taiwan standoff of 2031, the first contact protocols with the Merendi. He looked for lessons in both success and failure. On the 3rd day, they entered Archelian space. A military escort of 3 Imperial ships met them at the border. "Standard procedure or special treatment?" Hayes asked Clark as they watched the Archelian vessels through the view screen. "Both," Clark replied. "They always escort diplomatic ships, but 3 vessels is excessive. They're sending a message." That evening, Hayes couldn't sleep. He sat in his small cabin, looking at pictures of the executed Vesperi that Lisa had sent. Violet faces with expressions of fear and confusion. Children holding their parents' hands. Elders helped by younger family members. Hayes touched the screen. "I will get justice for you," he whispered. On the final approach to Archelaus Prime, Hayes stood on the bridge. The planet loomed large in the view screen, mostly brown with swirls of green near the poles. It was the homeworld of the Empire that had casually murdered 50,000 people to make a point. "We're receiving landing instructions," the pilot announced. "And a message." "Put it through," Hayes said. A cold voice spoke in heavily accented English. "Ambassador Hayes, Imperial Minister Drozik welcomes you to Archelaus Prime. Prepare for inspection upon landing." The journey was over. The real challenge was about to begin. The Olive Branch landed on a circular pad surrounded by tall, sharp-angled buildings. Hayes and his team waited 2 hours inside their ship while Archelian officials performed security checks. It was the first of many small insults designed to show the humans their place. When they were finally allowed to exit, they found 20 Archelian soldiers in full battle armor waiting for them. The soldiers stood perfectly still, their scaled faces showing no emotion. Their black armor gleamed in the orange light of Archelaus Prime's sun. A thin Archelian in flowing red robes approached. "I am Under-Secretary Kyle. You will follow me to your quarters. Minister Drozik is unable to meet you today." Hayes kept his face neutral despite his annoyance. Making diplomatic guests wait was another calculated insult in Archelian culture. "When will Minister Drozik be available?" Hayes asked. "When he chooses to be," the Undersecretary replied. Their quarters were in a plain building far from the Imperial Palace. The rooms were uncomfortably warm for humans, as Archelians preferred higher temperatures. The windows were small, and the furniture was designed for Archelian bodies, with their longer torsos and different joint structure. "They're trying to wear us down," Catherine Palmer said as the team gathered in the main room. "Every discomfort is intentional." "How long will they make us wait?" Laura Wilson asked. "As long as they think it takes to make us desperate," Hayes replied. "They want us at a disadvantage when negotiations begin." They waited 3 days. Each morning, they were told Minister Drozik was busy. Each afternoon, they were given a tour of some minor government facility, always accompanied by guards. Each evening, they returned to their uncomfortable quarters. On the 4th day, an Archelian military speeder arrived. The Undersecretary announced that Minister Drozik would see them now. The Imperial Palace was a massive structure of black stone and metal. Sharp spires reached toward the sky. Huge statues of past emperors lined the approach, each depicted conquering some enemy species. Inside, the palace was filled with displays of Archelian military might. Weapons taken from conquered peoples hung on walls. Banners from defeated armies draped from high ceilings. Guards in ceremonial armor stood at every doorway. "They're showing us what happens to their enemies," Clark whispered to Hayes. They were led through winding corridors to a large antechamber. Other diplomats from various species waited there. Some had clearly been waiting for days, their clothing wrinkled and their postures tired. "Ambassador Hayes," called a voice. A large Archelian in elaborate golden robes approached. "How unexpected that Minister Drozik will see you right away, when others have waited so long." The alien's voice dripped with false politeness. Hayes recognized the speaker as Ambassador Grun from the Talaxian Republic, a longtime rival of Earth in Concord politics. "Perhaps your visit has something to do with that unfortunate business with the Vesperi rebels," Grun continued. "Such a shame when criminals face justice." Hayes felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice level. The only crime was the murder of 50,000 innocent people. Before Grun could respond, doors at the end of the chamber opened. "The minister will see the human delegation now," announced a guard. The audience chamber was huge. The ceiling soared 50 meters high. Guards lined the walls. At the far end, seated on an elevated platform, was Minister Drozik. He was larger than most Archelians, with darker scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Behind him, on an even higher throne, sat Emperor Zekroth IV. The emperor's presence was unexpected. Typically, foreign diplomats met with the emperor only after several meetings with lesser officials. Hayes and his team walked the long path to the thrones. When they reached the proper distance, they stopped and waited. "Ambassador Hayes," said Minister Drozik, his voice echoing in the large room. "You have traveled far to speak with us. Yet I wonder what there is to say after your Vesperi friends chose their fate." The minister's words were deliberately provocative. Hayes could feel eyes watching from all sides, waiting to see how he would respond to this first test. Hayes stepped forward, and to everyone's surprise, addressed the emperor directly. He spoke in perfect formal Archelian, including the complex court dialect that few outsiders ever mastered. "Great Emperor, sovereign of the eternal stars, I come seeking truth about an act that has shaken the galaxy." Silence fell across the great hall. The emperor leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing at Hayes. Even Minister Drozik seemed shocked by the human's perfect use of court dialect. "You speak our language well," For a human, the Emperor said after a long pause, "I believe that respect begins with understanding." Hayes replied, "Still an Archelian, and I seek to understand why 50,000 innocent lives were ended." The Emperor waved a clawed hand. "They were not innocent. They were rebels who rejected the protection of our empire to ally with humans." Hayes nodded to Laura Wilson, who stepped forward and activated a small device. A hologram appeared between the humans and the Archelian leaders. It showed footage of the executed Vespari. "Our analysis shows that 83% of those executed were civilians," Hayes said, switching to English now that the formal greeting was complete. "Among them were 12,000 children and 8,000 elderly." Minister Drozik rose from his seat. "This display is not permitted. Guards." "Wait," the Emperor said, raising his hand. The guards who had started forward stopped immediately. "Let the human present his case. It will change nothing." Hayes nodded to Wilson again. The hologram changed to show a Vesperi settlement. The buildings were simple. No weapons were visible. "This was Colony V-17, where most of the executed came from," Hayes explained. "As you can see, it was not a military installation." The Emperor shrugged. "Appearances can be deceiving." "Yes, they can," Hayes agreed, "which is why we gathered more evidence." Catherine Palmer stepped forward now, joining Hayes and Wilson. She held up a data crystal. "This contains testimony from survivors who escaped the purge," she said. They described how Imperial forces rounded up civilians, separated families, and executed them without trial. "The words of traitors mean nothing," Minister Drozik scoffed. Daniel Clark silently handed Hayes a small metal box. Hayes opened it and removed a drone no bigger than his palm. "This surveillance drone was deployed by resistance fighters within your empire," Hayes said. "It recorded the executions from multiple angles." The hologram changed again, showing clearer footage of the massacre. The sound was included this time. The cries of the Vesperi filled the hall. "Enough," the Emperor shouted, standing now. "These were necessary actions to maintain order in our empire." Hayes closed his hand around the drone, and the hologram disappeared. "We have also analyzed your broadcast to the galaxy. Our AI systems confirmed that the orders came directly from the Imperial Palace, not from field commanders." The Emperor's scales darkened with anger. "You dare to spy on Imperial communications." "We didn't need to spy," Hayes replied calmly. "Your own broadcast contained embedded command codes. You wanted everyone to know this came from the top." Hayes looked around the hall, making eye contact with various Archelian officials present. "But there's something even more interesting we discovered." He nodded to Palmer, who activated another hologram. This one showed maps of the Vesperi colony worlds where the massacres took place. "These regions were recently surveyed by Imperial mining corporations," Hayes said. "They discovered rich deposits of trinium and quantum crystals, resources that became much easier to access once the Vesperi were removed." The Emperor sank back onto his throne. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Several officials in the hall began whispering to each other. "So the true motivation wasn't security or punishment," Hayes continued, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "It was greed disguised as imperial policy." Minister Drozik stepped down from his platform, his face a mask of fury. "You have insulted the Emperor and the Empire. This audience is over." "No," the Emperor said suddenly. "The human has." The Emperor raised his hand for silence. The great hall became quiet once more, his yellow eyes fixed on Hayes. "You have presented your evidence, Ambassador," the Emperor said. "But what do you hope to achieve? What is done cannot be undone. The Vesperi chose their fate when they betrayed our empire." Hayes took a step forward. The guards tensed, but the Emperor waved them back. "I did not come here only to accuse," Hayes said. His voice was strong and clear in the large space. "I came to offer a way forward." This seemed to surprise everyone in the hall, including Hayes' own team. Only Catherine Palmer showed no reaction. She had helped craft what would come next. A way forward. Minister Drozik laughed coldly. What could humans possibly offer the mighty Archelian Empire? Hayes stood tall. The Empire has 3 choices now. I will explain each one. He held up one finger. First, you can continue to deny wrongdoing. If you choose this path, I have already prepared evidence packages for all members of the Galactic Concord. 7 major powers have seen this evidence and stand ready to act. Murmurs spread through the hall. The Emperor's scales darkened slightly, a sign of concern in Archelians. Hayes raised a second finger. Your second choice is to blame this massacre on rogue commanders. But as I've shown, the command codes in your broadcast prove Imperial authorization. This option will fail. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. And the third option, human. Acknowledge what happened. Make it right. Move forward in a new relationship with the galaxy. Minister Drozik laughed again. You want us to admit defeat. I want you to choose wisdom over pride. Hayes answered. Here is my proposal. He nodded to Laura Wilson, who activated a small holoprojector. A document appeared in the air between Hayes and the Emperor. The Empire will acknowledge the executions and express regret for the loss of innocent life. Hayes began. You will provide reparations to surviving Vesperi families. Impossible. Drozik shouted. Hayes continued as if there had been no interruption. You will accept oversight from the Galactic Concord for future interactions with non-Archelian species. The Emperor's face showed growing anger, but Hayes pressed on. In exchange, Earth will share advancements in quantum fold technology that your scientists have been trying to develop for decades. This caused immediate reaction. The Archelians have been struggling to match human advances in faster-than-light travel. We will also help negotiate disputed territories with the Nyx Collective, Hayes added. Territories your empire has been fighting over for 20 years. The Emperor's expression changed slightly. The Nyx Collective had been a persistent problem for the Empire. These terms are insulting, Minister Drozik said, but his voice held less certainty now. These terms are realistic, Hayes countered. And consider the alternative. He looked around the hall at the gathered officials. 7 major powers are prepared to implement a full trade embargo against the Empire. Your economy depends on resource exchange. How long would your empire last if cut off from galactic trade? 1 year. 2. The hall erupted in voices. The Emperor raised his hand again for silence. You threaten us? He asked Hayes. I offer you a choice between a difficult path and a disastrous one, Hayes replied. The Archelian Empire is powerful, but not more powerful than the combined might of the Galactic Concord. The Emperor stood. He was taller than Hayes had realized, nearly 2.5 meters in height. You have courage, Ambassador Hayes. Few would dare to speak to me this way in my own palace. The Emperor turned to Minister Drozik. Take the human proposal. We will review it. He looked back at Hayes. Return to your quarters. You will have our answer within 1 planetary rotation. As Hayes and his team were escorted from the hall, Catherine Palmer whispered, This is unexpected. I thought they would dismiss us immediately. They're actually considering it. Laura Wilson added in amazement. Hayes kept his face neutral until they were outside the palace. Only then did he allow himself a small smile. They're considering it because they have no choice, he said quietly. Now we wait. Back in their quarters, the human delegation tried to rest, but tension made it difficult. They had come to the heart of an empire that had executed 50,000 people without hesitation. Now they waited to see if their gambit would work. Daniel Clark checked and rechecked the security of their rooms. We should prepare for a quick exit, he said. I don't trust them to keep their word. Laura Wilson sat at a small desk, listening to communications with a special device hidden in her ear. She frowned and looked up at Hayes. There's unusual activity on Imperial channels, she reported. Military frequencies are active, more than normal. Hayes looked out the small window at the orange sky of Archelaus Prime. They might be preparing a show of force, or worse. Catherine Palmer entered the room, her face tight with worry. "I've been analyzing court protocols. There's a procedure for rejecting diplomatic proposals that involves a formal ceremony." "And?" Hayes asked. "Imperial guards have been called to the ceremonial hall. It happens in cases of execution of foreign diplomats." The room went silent. Hayes took a deep breath. "We knew the risks coming here," he said finally. "Daniel, how quickly can we get to the ship if needed?" Clark's face was grim. "If they're not actively trying to stop us, maybe 30 minutes. If they are..." He didn't finish the sentence. Hayes made a decision. "Laura, contact the Olive Branch. Tell them to be ready for emergency departure." He turned to Palmer. "Catherine, I need you to reach out to any moderate factions in the government. Use your old contacts. Find out if there's any support for our proposal." "What are you going to do?" Clark asked. Hayes sat down at the main console in their quarters. "I'm recording a message. Insurance." For the next hour, Hayes spoke to the recorder, detailing everything they had discovered about the massacre. He included all the evidence they had gathered. He explained the reasonable terms they had offered the Empire. He ended with a personal message to Earth. "If you're seeing this, we didn't make it back. But what we learned cannot die with us. The galaxy must know the truth." When he finished, he encrypted the message with special diplomatic codes and set it to broadcast automatically to all Galactic Concord channels if they didn't return to their ship within 24 hours. As night fell on Arclus Prime, Catherine Palmer returned with news. "There's a split in the Imperial Council," she said. "Some members, led by Minister Drozik, want to reject our terms and possibly detain us. Others, mostly from the trade guilds, are arguing for acceptance." "What about the military?" Clark asked. "Divided," Palmer replied. "The generals are loyal to the Emperor. Whatever he decides, they'll support." Laura Wilson removed her listening device. "I've detected messages going to outlying star systems. Fleet movements. They could be positioning for conflict." Hayes nodded. "Or it could be a bluff to strengthen their position." Later that night, as the others slept in shifts, Hayes sat alone. He thought about Earth, billions of light years away. About the people who would be affected by what happened here. About the Vesperi who had already died. He took out a small device from his pocket. It was a secure communicator linked directly to Earth Central Command. He had not told his team about it. The Security Council had given it to him before he left, against his wishes. In case diplomacy fails, they had said. If he activated it, Earth fleet vessels waiting at the edge of Archelian space would move in. It would mean war, but it would also mean the human delegation might be rescued. Hayes looked at the device for a long moment, then put it away. War would mean millions more dead, maybe billions. He had to believe diplomacy could still work. As the alien sun began to rise, casting strange shadows through the small window, Hayes prepared himself for whatever the new day would bring. One way or another, the fate of two civilizations would be decided soon. At precisely the time promised, an Imperial transport arrived to collect the human delegation. Hayes and his team were escorted back to the palace. This time, they were taken to a smaller chamber. The Emperor was there, along with Minister Drozik and several other high-ranking officials. The Emperor's face revealed nothing as Hayes and his team entered. The humans stood in silence, waiting. "Ambassador Hayes," the Emperor began, "the Empire has considered your proposal." Hayes felt his heart beat faster but kept his face calm. For thousands of years, the Archelian Empire has never bowed to outside pressure. The Emperor continued. "It would be easy to reject your terms and show the galaxy our strength." Minister Drozik nodded in agreement, his scales brightening with anticipation. However, the Emperor said, "True strength lies in knowing when to fight and when to adapt." Drozik's head snapped toward the Emperor in surprise. "The Empire accepts most of your terms," the Emperor announced. "We will acknowledge the regrettable loss of Vesperi lives. We will provide compensation to survivors. We will accept limited oversight from the Concord for a period of 10 years. Hayes could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had expected rejection, even possible imprisonment, not acceptance. In return, the Emperor continued, we expect immediate sharing of quantum fold technology and human assistance with the Nix collective negotiations. Hayes nodded. Earth will honor these commitments. The Emperor stood. There is one more condition. The Empire requires a demonstration of human commitment to justice. Hayes tensed, unsure what was coming next. Imperial General Krovesh was responsible for exceeding his orders regarding the Vesperi, the Emperor said. He will be surrendered to a Galactic Concord tribunal for trial. Hayes understood immediately. The Empire was offering a scapegoat, someone to take the blame for the massacre while protecting the Emperor and his inner circle. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was more than Hayes had expected. This is acceptable, Hayes agreed. Within hours, the agreement was formalized. The Emperor himself recorded a message to be broadcast throughout the galaxy. He expressed deep regret for the excessive actions taken against Vesperi populations. He announced reparations and the surrender of General Krovesh for trial. As the human delegation prepared to depart, an Archelian official approached Hayes in a quiet corridor. Ambassador Hayes, the official said softly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. I am Senior Diplomat Lorva. There is something you should know. Hayes studied the Archelian carefully. I'm listening. The Emperor's hardline faction has been weakened by this outcome, Lorva said. Many of us have long argued for a more balanced approach to galactic relations. This diplomatic defeat has given us leverage. You're saying there are changes coming within the Empire? Hayes asked. Slow changes, yes. The seeds you planted today may grow into something important. The Archelian bowed slightly. Safe journey, Ambassador. 2 days later, the Olive Branch departed Archelian space without incident. Laura Wilson worked with Earth to prepare the technology transfers. Catherine Palmer began drafting approaches for the Nix collective negotiations. Daniel Clark finally relaxed his vigilance enough to sleep a full night. 1 week after leaving Archelaus Prime, Hayes was back on Earth. He stood before the Security Council, presenting his report. Some called this a victory, he told them. Others say we compromised too much. The truth lies somewhere in between. The council debated for hours. Some members praised Hayes for avoiding war while securing justice. Others criticized him for not punishing the Empire more severely. After the meeting, Hayes traveled to a Vesperi refugee camp in the North American zone. Hundreds of violet-skinned survivors had gathered to meet him. An elderly Vesperi stepped forward, leaning on a cane. You are the one who faced the Empire, she said. Hayes nodded. Did they admit what they did to our people? She asked. Yes, Hayes replied. It wasn't everything we wanted, but it was something. A beginning. The old Vesperi reached out and touched Hayes' hand. Then there is hope. As Hayes looked at the faces around him, he knew that diplomatic victories could not bring back the dead. But perhaps they could prevent more death in the future. Humanity's role in the galaxy came with both great power and profound responsibility. Today, they had lived up to that responsibility. Yes, Hayes said to the Vesperi, there is hope.